All right, guys, we are going to talk all about shame in relationships. And I am talking about that kind of shame where you're like, I am so ashamed, I can't even talk about it, right? Where I can't like look my husband in the eye, I can't have a conversation. I am just stuck in this painful, shameful place. So today I am going to help you understand where this shame is coming from, the origins of it, and how to move through it effectively. I am Rachael Sloan. For those of you who don't know me yet, I am a relationship coach and a self-love advocate. And shame has been a huge piece of my personal journey to self love. So, we're going to talk about how it impacts relationships, exactly what it is and where it comes from, and how to ultimately do away with shame in your life, in your love life, in your personal life, in your self love journey, and all of it. So, let's first define shame. Shame is an emotion. Right? Like any emotion, shame is a set of physical sensations in your body. These will vary from people to people, but like the hallmark of shame is like heat in your face, right? A hot red face. We even have the saying, right? Shame faced. But shame might feel different in your body. It probably feels different for all of us. So you'll have to get to know the physical sensations of shame for yourself. Shame is a set of physical sensations in the body, an emotion caused by your thoughts. And shame is almost always caused by thoughts like, I should or I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have yelled. I shouldn't have cried. I should have kept it together. I should have woken up earlier or been more productive or worked out longer. Right? The shoulds and shouldn'ts tend to lead to shame. And in relationships, shame can be incredibly disruptive, right? I don't want to use the word damaging, but it can be really disruptive because what shame does is leads us to hide. Hiding is the action that flows naturally from shame. Makes you want to crawl under the covers and pull them over your head and never come out again. But what does that do to a relationship? When you're hiding, you're not communicating. And in fact, shame can almost feel like a vice on your throat to the point where you cannot talk. If you're feeling a lot of shame, you might literally not be able to speak to your partner, to communicate about what you're feeling or thinking because it is so painful. So, shame stops communication. Shame can also be really confusing for your partner. For instance, if you got in a fight with your partner and you have shame about getting angry, about losing your temper, you feel like you're a bad person. You shouldn't have done those things and you want to go and hide. But what does your partner see? Your partner sees you being cold, aloof, distant. Maybe they think you're falling out of love with them or you don't like them or you're terribly mad at them. And this was a really eye-opening experience for me in my relationship. When I grew up thinking anger was really not an acceptable emotion. That was something I learned. And so I struggled for a long time with anger. And if I had a fight with my husband, I would feel almost immediate shame about any amount of anger I felt. But I never told him that. We never talked about the shame. I finally told him and he was shocked. He had no idea that I felt ashamed. And I look back and I think about those times where I didn't talk to him, I couldn't touch him, I could barely look at him. And I think he had no idea that what I was feeling was shame and judgment of myself. What was he thinking, right? How must he have thought I felt about him? Shame creates so many opportunities for misunderstanding and miscommunications in relationships. So it's really something that's worth working on, not just for your own happiness and peace of mind, but for the health of your relationship. Because when you cannot talk or communicate with somebody about what you're feeling because of shame, it just creates like a minefield of miscommunication, misunderstanding that can lead to greater and greater conflict. So shame is worth working on. Let's talk about how to work on it. In order to work on shame, we have to explore the origins of shame. And this might seem like a subtle distinction or kind of unimportant, but it's really critical to understand where you learned to think the thoughts that make you feel shame. Where did you learn to believe that you shouldn't feel anger, that you shouldn't cry, that you should get up early and be productive? Right? Whatever it is that makes you feel shame, it's a should or a shouldn't that you learned to believe, that you learned was true at some point in your life, probably as a child. And I'm going to explain why it's so important to understand and explore the origins. Because if you just think it's true, objectively true, like most of us do, we're like, well, you're just supposed to get up early and be productive. That's like what good people do. It's what successful people do. We're like, that's just a truth. When we accept that as a truth, we're going to always be a victim of shame because we're human. And sometimes we're not going to do the things we think we should or shouldn't do. And when we don't, we're going to feel shame about them. So if it's just objectively true that you shouldn't get angry, Sometimes you do, because you're a human, you're going to have to feel shame. So as long as that's objectively true, you have no control. That's why I think it's so important to understand where you learned to think this way. Because when you recognize that you've learned to think this way at some point, you learn to think that it's not okay to be angry, you learn to think that it's not okay to raise your voice. When you realize that it's something you learned, then you can recognize this is a learned habit of thought. My shame is a learned habit of feeling. That's very different than something that's just inherently true or a part of me. If it's a learned habit of thought or feeling, then I can change it if I want, just like any habit. With a little self-inquiry and hard work, I can change a habit, right? I can't change something that's inherently true or a part of me. That's why this questioning the origins is so important. And it's also important to understand how powerful the origins of these shameful thoughts can be. When we are small children, it is so important for us to learn how to navigate in the social world. We have to learn what's acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable behavior. It's literally essential to our survival, right? As infants and as children, we are so dependent on other people to care for us. We've got to learn the ropes. We've got to learn how to make it, how to fit in, how to be acceptable. And we do that by figuring out what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do in our family group, in our society. We learn that by watching, right? It's not just about what your parents tell you is right or wrong. It's not just the things they intentionally teach you. It's not even about the things that they punish or praise you for. It's what they model. It's how they deal with their own emotions and thoughts. It's how they deal with other people. What judgments do they pass? How do they cope with their anger, with their sadness, with their frustrations, right? Children are like these like hyper receptive sponges to all of this stuff. They soak it up. And I'm not saying this because I want you to blame your parents for your self-judgmental thoughts or your shame. That is not the point here. The point is to help you see that these are learned habits of behavior. They're not objective truths. Okay, so what do we do? How do we get through shame? How do we stop feeling it and stop hiding? I'm going to give you guys a 4-step process to start to work through your shame, and then I'm going to tell you where to go from there. So the very first step is to recognize and acknowledge that what you're feeling is shame. When you start to do this, you might find that you have mostly shame as an emotion. This is often true for people with anxiety too. Like once you become aware that that's what you're feeling, you notice you're feeling it all the time. And that's, I think, especially true for a lot of women, that we have a lot of shame around many things we say and think and feel. So get in touch with your shame, start to notice how you feel it, and just recognize. That's step one. Recognize you're having it. So, okay, I'm feeling ashamed. Once you recognize and acknowledge that that's what you're feeling, you're going to dissociate from that shame. And so this is going to give you, this is a mindfulness exercise that is going to create a little space for you to have some compassionate self-inquiry and exploration. So I want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. And you're going to imagine the part of you that feels ashamed. I want you to notice it, that there's a part of you that feels shame. Notice how it feels. What do those physical sensations feel like? And then I want you to imagine that that part of you floats out of your body, that it separates from you. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can feel it or sense it. But get a sense that it's outside of you, somewhere in front of you or to a side. And just notice, what do you notice about it? Does it look like something? Can you see it or imagine it? Do you have a feeling from it? And as you do this, I want you just to become aware of the shameful part, the part that feels shame outside of you, and then what's left, what's you, the greater whole, the you that is more than just your shame, that is a sum of many, many parts and not just one. The part of you that is experiencing physical sensations, but is not defined by those physical sensations. So you're going to kind of hold this dual space inside yourself where you have your core self, the you that is, the you that is experiencing, and then there's this part that feels shame. And I want you just to take a moment and notice how those physical sensations of shame belong to that part, and you're the witness, the observer, the one experiencing. So this dissociation is going to take some of the pressure off. It's going to take a little bit of the pain out of the shame. That's going to give us room, create some space to explore it. Now that is step 3. Exploration. You're going to dive in and figure out where this shame originated. If you're feeling shame because you got angry, Where did you learn that it's not okay to be angry? How was that modeled to you? Was there a specific event or a time in your life that you learned to believe that thought? And this is going to take a lot of curiosity and compassion for yourself as you start to get curious about where you learned these thoughts. Where did you learn these beliefs? And keep holding this dissociated space so that you can do that with curiosity and compassion, right? Don't identify with that shame. Be like, you're like the investigator, the detective who's going to go and figure out where that shame came from. How did I learn to think this? And all you're trying to do here is show yourself that it's not objectively true that you shouldn't feel angry. You're just showing yourself that this is a learned habit of thought. At some point, you learn to think this and you want to understand why. What is this part that feels ashamed? Where did that come from? What is it experiencing? What is it afraid of? How did it learn to think this way? And then step 4 is going to be to offer some support and comfort. So you're going to invite that part back into you and just imagine, this is just an act of imagination. You're going to imagine that part integrating back into your body. And as it happens, just notice where it comes in. Does it come into your head, shoulders, into your heart or your stomach? And if you don't have a sensation of where it comes in, that's okay too. But I want you to notice and place your hand on that part of your body. Maybe it's a shoulder, maybe it's your head. If you don't know, if you can't imagine where that came in, that's okay. Just place your hand on your heart. And again, you're going to take a moment, even though this part has integrated with you, I want you to hold that dissociated awareness that there's this part that feels shame, and then there's a core you. There's something behind that, some observer, some experiencer, the core self of you. And from that core self, I want you to offer comfort, offer solace and understanding and compassion to the part of you that feels ashamed. So with your hand on your heart or on whatever body part that you felt that shameful part come back into your body, you're just going to take a moment and offer your understanding and your compassion, right? You know now where that shame comes from. You know how it learned that thought, and you are offering it from that inner wisdom, from that core self. You're offering it comfort and love and compassion. You're not trying to change it or make it go away. You're just being there for that part of you that is suffering from this shame. And stay there for a moment, maybe 30 or 60 seconds, and give yourself that compassion. That is something, once you've done it and felt it, that you can always come back to. Anytime you notice you're feeling shame, recognize it, dissociate, take a moment to notice that that shame is not the core of who you are. It's a part of you, and you are a greater whole, an observer, an experiencer. And then check in. Where did that shame come from? How did you learn to think those thoughts? Can I comfort and offer solace to that part of me that is hurting because of those learned beliefs, those learned habits of belief? Those 4 steps are going to dramatically change your relationship to shame. It's going to change the power that shame has over you, and it's going to help you release yourself from some of those hiding behaviors. It's going to help you have more compassion for your own experience. Once you have done that, that is the self-acceptance work. That is the allowing work and the not resisting work. Once you've done that, then you can choose these thoughts that are leading to shame. These thoughts, I shouldn't feel angry. I should be more productive. Are those thoughts I want to keep? Are they working for me? Do I like them? There is no right or wrong answer here. You absolutely always get to choose. Maybe you keep those thoughts, but maybe you decide they're not serving you. And if they're not, then you can start to question those thoughts, question those beliefs that you learned. Find out if there's other ways of thinking available to you. What are alternative ways of thinking? How else could I think about anger? How else could I think about productivity? Are there other options out there besides this one that I learned as a child? And if there are, do I perhaps want to adopt one of them? Because that is a lot of the work that I do with my clients inside my one-on-one coaching program. We work through allowing and accepting and healing this shame. A lot of that shame is kind of coming from our wounded inner child, right? It's the things that we learn as small children that then continue on into our adult lives and create suffering for us. So we do some of that inner healing work, but then the really fun work is to decide, now that you know what's in there, now that you know where it came from and what those thoughts are, do you like them? Do you want to keep them? And if not, What would you like to do instead? What would you like to think or believe? How do you want to shape your manual for what it means to be a good person, a productive person, a loving, kind, happy person, a good wife, a good husband, a good partner, a good parent? How do you want to write that manual? What do you want to make it say? And how will that affect your life? How will that change the way you feel, the way you show up, whether or not you feel shame, the things that you are brave enough to do? Right? Because if you're not going to punish yourself, if you're not going to feel shame for failing at something, for not doing something you should have, for doing something you shouldn't have, if you're not going to feel shame for that, it opens up so many opportunities. So many things become available to you that you could do, that you could try, the kind of person you could become if you start to rewrite your own manual. So that is the really fun work. But first, we have to do that self-love, that self-acceptance that comes through exploring, understanding these parts of us that feel these emotions and allowing them to be there, helping them to be there and to heal. Okay, guys, so if you'd like help with any of this, whether it's the acceptance part or the crafting a new manual and making some intentional new thoughts, creating your life on purpose, please go ahead and book a free strategy session with me. The link is in the description of this video. I would love to hear about what's going on with you, understand what you're experiencing and where you're at on this journey, and see if it's something I can help with. If it is, I'll explain what I do, how I can help, and we will create a master plan for your own journey to overcome shame, overcome the paralysis of always hiding, find your voice, create your life and the love life that you desire. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me. I will see you on Saturday.